Mm. How's it going, everybody? This is me again, yours truly, Rama Screen. I'm back for another live stream, and right now I want to give you my review of today's Marvel Cloak and Dagger all new episode. This is season 2, episode 4, titled Rabbit Hole, and it will air tonight. Tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific and Eastern time on Freeform channel on Freeform. So I want to thank Freeform and Marvel for granting me the screener of today's new episode. Just a heads up again, with most of my TV reviews and episode recaps, this video may contain spoilers. I'll be spilling some spoilers, not major spoilers, okay? Um, but I'll be giving you the context and the synopsis and probably recapping what happened last week's episode to give you a refresher. Um, so that's the extent of my spoilers in this review. All right, so heads up, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. You've been warned. Oh my god, I freaking love this show. Oh. Okay. So if you, my fellow Cloak and Dagger fans, would recall, last week ended with, because Tyrone and Tandy were trying to bust this place of gangs. I forgot what the gang's name is called, um, but it pretty much turned sideways as soon as Mayhem entered the scene and she started like unloading that machine gun, like the bullets from it. It's like boom, 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 boom. You see the slow mo, and the bullets almost hit this one kid that is sort of part of the gang, but you know how it is. Gangs would recruit like young folks like him, and very naive, gullible, that just wanted to feel like he belongs somewhere. And so the bullets almost hit him, but at that very, very last minute, freaking Tyrone, uh, using his cloak power, kind of surrounds the kid, kind of protects the kid, and in the process, Mayhem, Bridget's doppelganger, the not so nice doppelganger. In that process, she gets sucked into this cloak. This whole, whoa, what's going on? Where did she go? And so, but at the beginning of today's episode, there's a refresher of what happened or what may have happened to Connors, that detective that, remember that dirty cop that killed Tyrone's brother when Tyrone was a kid. So it seems that what 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 happened to Mayhem, gets sucked into the cloak. It seems that may also have happened to Connors. Um, so today's episode starts out with Olivia and Tyrone in the church, in the warehouse, because Tyrone transports not Olivia. I'll just use the character's name, Tandy. Tyrone transports Tandy and himself back to the church, and Tandy's like, "Whoa, what is that? What is that thing that you just did back there? Where's Mayhem?" Um, and here's the thing: I remember interviewing Aubrey Joseph, the actor who plays Tyrone. I interviewed him at WonderCon this past March. And if you have watched that video, you would also remember that I asked him what kind of new powers that we will see Tyrone perform in this season 2. Because Tyrone has that cloak ability, but for those of us who have never read the comic books, I did not grow up reading Cloak and Dagger. So I'm still learning as I go when it comes to the abilities of both Tyrone and Tandy's. So I asked Aubrey, and Aubrey kind of danced around the question. It's like, yeah, I'll leave you for you guys to find out for yourselves. Um, and so voila, this is what happens in today's episode. We get to see another facet of his power. And so I looked it up, and on Wiki. And one of the abilities of Tyrone's cloak is that he can transport victims or transport people to this dark force dimension via his cloak. There you go. He can transport people to this dark force dimension via his cloak. Now, remember, by the end of last week's episode, Mayhem finds herself in this dimension where she approaches this gas station and she opens up the fridge that is located there at the gas station, and she sees her old boyfriend, that cop that got murdered and got left inside the refrigerator. So this is that said dark dimension that I mentioned to you. So this episode reveals that latest ability of Cloak of Tyrone, and that's cool. I like it. So what happens, or what transpires, is that Tandy decides to. By the way, there's this bit about like, oh, she went inside you. No, she didn't go inside me. She went through me. I know. We'll get the sexual innuendo or joke out of the way. Inside me. So she goes through Tyrone and she finds herself in this dark dimension. That's the dimension that Cloak and throws people into. Dark Force. There you go. So there's that. At the same time, in the police office, Bridget is trying to process everything and trying to help the girls, but the system at B is unfair to the girls, and all the while, the gang members who are there in custody, they notice a wanted picture of Tyrone on the wall. So they got hold of Tyrone's identity as Tyrone Johnson, and of course, the database stealing our shit. We're like using his power and stealing our drugs and money. Let's get him. Let's get him. So even though they don't know about the church whereabouts, or the church location, they do know Tyrone Johnson's family and where they live, and so they send some of their goons to basically try to kill Tyrone's mom. And so Bridget alerts Tyrone about, hey, you got to protect your mom. And so Tyrone comes, and what happens next, basically, or what happens the rest of this episode is basically Tyrone tries to protect his mom from the gangbangers who are trying to kill them. And so while Tandy is stuck in the Dark Force dimension, Tyrone is with his mom. And here's the deal, and this is a minor spoiler. So during her time in the Dark Force, it's okay. So this is, I mentioned to you many times that my favorite episodes or my favorite stories are when the characters go through hallucination or psychedelic trip or dimensions where things are not what they meant, things are not what they appear to be, or like it's like the rabbit hole in the Alice Wonderland, hence the title of this episode, Rabbit Hole, not Rabbit Hole. And so one of the instances in this rabbit hole that or this Dark Force dimension is that in order for Tandy to go forward to see where or to locate Mayhem, she has to go through this machine that looks like one of those telescopes at viewing area at Griffith Park. If you want to get a good view of the landscape, you have to put quarters in. So that's the looking glass that they, but instead of quarters, she has to put in her power. So she has to let go of her power. She has to put the dagger inside that thing, and because she does that in the Dark Force dimension, where it is part of Cloak, part of Tyrone, because she does that, because she lets go. Not only does she not have her power, but also in the real world, Tyrone also doesn't have his power. So the moment when Tyrone and his mom, like Tyrone wants to transport him and his mom, right, to somewhere safe. He couldn't. He couldn't do it. It's like, whoa, what's going on? Where's my powers? Why have I lost my powers? Turns out it's because inside the Dark Force dimension, Tandy just gave up her power. So there's that connection between Tandy and Tyrone, between Dagger and Cloak. Um, it's another uh, way that the writers let you know that, hey, these two characters are, they're like two sides of the same coin. All right, so one affects the other. I love the whole thing with Tyrone and his mom. This episode allows them or gives them the chance to, have those dramatic moments, mother and son dramatic moments. And as I mentioned to you in last week's episode or previous reviews of this season 2, I told you that it seems that in this season 2, many of the supporting characters that we saw in season 1 will be more they will show up more in the recurring role. So they won't show up often, because Bridget O'Reilly gets pushed front front forward to make her equal, storyline wise, equal with Tandy and Tyrone. These three characters become the lead in season 2. So the other supporting characters kind of take a step back, and they only show up recurringly, all right, when the story requires them to show up. Like last week, we had Father Delgado, and in this episode, we have Tyrone's mom, and then we'll see who shows up next week's episode. Um, and so I like this whole thing. It gives a chance for them to have this, like, at one point, Tyrone's mom even reveals that she doesn't like Tandy, which cracks me up. And here's another thing that connects Tandy to Tyrone is that in this, I love how the writers staged it, or how they how they staged the connection. So while Tandy inside the Dark Force dimension explains to Mayhem, because she by this time she already meets Mayhem, she explains to her about the missing girls in her own way, and in the real world, Tyrone is explaining that same thing to his mom, but in an illustrative way, by using story about some ancient French king and how he mistreats some of the ladies in his time. So the juxtaposition of those two stories, that Tandy and Tyrone share with Tyrone's mom and Mayhem, respectively, I think that's fascinating. It's clever. It's it's just another way that the writers want to let you know again that Tyrone and Tandy are two sides of the same coin. They um, that they need each other. They have to be a tandem because their fate is intertwined with one another. And I love that. I love that. So that's what you see in today's episode as well, or tonight's episode. Um, for Tandy, at one point in the Dark Force dimension, she comes across, because the set that the Dark Force dimension is set in is a mall, like an empty mall. So it's fascinating because they go down the escalator and then they go to another store, but nobody's there, obviously. And they come across this old record store, like full of vinyl records and CDs and whatnot. And many of them have the names of the missing girls, but there's one section where it's dedicated to Tandy. And so Tandy, one after the next, she keeps playing the vinyl record with her name on it. And every time she does that, it reveals a bit about her past. And so she revisits her painful memories. Because remember, if you guys recall, in season 1, one of the revelations was that Tandy's dad was a dick to to Tandy's mom. He was abusive. And so it's like, oh, and then you get to see more of when Tandy's a kid, and the parents have arguments. Sometimes the dad would like very aggressive, will go very aggressive towards her mom, and then Tandy, of course, being a kid, tries to like muffle it down with earphones or tries to ignore it, and so it brings up old pains in Tandy. And I like this one brief segment for two reasons. Number one, um, it gives chance for some of the um, cool eccentric songs to kind of kick in. Now remember, this one of the big appeals of Cloak and Dagger is the song selection. Many of them are not necessarily mainstream. Some of them are underground music, underground artists, but it feels like a series of music videos. So instead of the composer's score, the score for the film, accompanying the scene, accompanying what happens in the storyline, instead of that, it's these songs. Uh, Other shows do it too, but not as prevalent, as not as prominent as Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger, it's like really like very often, like one after the next, the scene after scene. They would use probably like 8 songs in one episode, give or take. Black Lightning is another example of that too. Whenever Black Lightning has a fight scene, instead of the intense score in the background, what's playing is I don't know, Al Green or some some R&B soul or something, hip hop. Um, but Cloak and Dagger, the placement of those songs are more prevalent compared to other shows that do it too. And so in this segment, one of the songs is this nice rendition of like freaking 20 years ago, man. And but it's not the original Britney Spears version. It's this artist that covers the song, but in a very solemn, subdued, heartfelt way with just a guitar and a voice. Oh, I love it. I love it. And then she puts on another vinyl record, another memory surfaces, and another song also kicks in. I love it. I love it. Um, so that's the first part why I like that segment. The second part, or the second reason, is that it reminds me of why I like Doom Patrol in DC Universe, Doom Patrol series, because Doom Patrol takes its sweet time in really relishing in exploring their characters' personal demons. And so that's what happens in tonight's episode of Cloak and Dagger. Tandy's painful past. Um, Obviously, it's like the show is telling you. Obviously, she has not um, come to terms, or come to actually, you know, come. She's not at peace with that part of her past yet. That's what I was trying to say. She's not at peace with that yet. So that's what Doom Patrol does, and this is what this exactly what this tonight's episode does for Tandy. And if you are not into that sort of deal, therapy sort of deal, like, oh, exploring somebody's pain in the past, then you might not like this episode, because that is what you will get from Tandy's journey in this episode. Of course, by the end of it, we get to see exactly where Connors is, or has been all this time. So that's the big revelation at the end. And there's more to it that I won't reveal here. Um, but and for Tyrone is at that point in this episode where he is willing to sacrifice for the safety of his mom, and that is the coming of age for a superhero, any superhero, when you are willing to put others ahead of yourselves. that's when you know you're there. And I think Tyrone, it has that big heart, um, has that sense of martyrdom, if you will. Oh, I love it. I love it. I cannot tell you enough how much I love this show. So today's episode overall, another fantastic one. I think I want to say that when it comes to Mayhem, I really don't know where she lies on the spectrum, because she seems genuine when it comes to like trying to take down the bad guys that are hurting or harming these girls or kidnapping these girls. Obviously, her method is wrong. Um, but there's a part of me where I'm like, hey, you know what? This is why I like revenge movies. If the bad guys get what's coming to them at the hands of Mayhem, maybe not. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. So we haven't seen yet, or we, at least not in this episode, um, that big conflict between Mayhem versus Tandy and Tyrone. There's a little bit teased in it in this episode where, in which Mayhem does something, and then Tandy comes in and intervenes with pretty much a clock, like violently, trying to stop Mayhem, right? Not in a negative way. So there's a bit of that tease. Maybe that's a tease for like what's going to be in store for us this season. But it's a very very minor tease. I'm still trying to figure out, if Mayhem gets the job done and Bridget doesn't, right? If Bridget doesn't, because Bridget is by the book. So I think we, the audience, will come to wrestle with this, like trying to justify and rationalize Mayhem, or Mayhem's purpose in the season. So I think that is really really cool to explore. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. I mean, my review of today's all new Marvel Cloak and Dagger season 2 episode 4, titled Rabbit Hold. It's a play on rabbit hole. Starring Aubrey Joseph and Olivia Holt. Once again, I've interviewed them at WonderCon, both Aubrey and Olivia. So come check out my and watch my video interviews with those talented young actors right here on Rama Screen YouTube channel. As always, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Press that like button, ring that bell. And if you can help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. That's patreon.com/ramascreen. Let's rock this.